you talked about releasing the ego. How do we release it? If you have a child, and that child is in a toy store or a grocery store and they want something and you say no, and that child throws a screaming temper tantrum in the aisle, and you start to shout at that child, what happens? Any parents here? Anybody's kids ever throw a temper tantrum? What happens when you start shouting at them when they're having a temper tantrum? Does it get better or worse? It gets worse. The ego's the same. This is why I really not only avoid, but try to explain otherwise than words like fighting our ego or conquering the ego or beating the ego or winning the ego or anything like that, because the ego is part of you. And as I always say, even if you beat it, you're going to sleep with the loser. You've got a war. Whoever wins, you're sleeping with both of them. I mean, if you say, I'm fighting my ego, or I'm fighting my anger, or I'm fighting my lust, I'm fighting my greed. Well, even if you win, the beaten ego is still inside. The beaten lust, the beaten greed doesn't go somewhere. Doesn't, stick its tail between its legs and, walk out the door. It's still inside of you. And that's why I really try to avoid thinking about it as fighting it. When we talk about releasing the ego, though, as you asked, you also can't just release it like that. It's not sadly like a jacket that you can just kind of slip out of. It's intertwined into so much of who we are. Our ego is intertwined with our heart, with our emotion, with our yearning, with our desires. So unfortunately, you can't just release the ego like you let go of a jacket you're wearing. What we have to do first is understand the ego, look at it. What does the kid who's throwing a temper tantrum need? Attention. Yeah, exactly. And so the only way that I've ever seen that works with a kid throwing a temper tantrum is to go and scoop them up and hold them in your arms. And yeah, they're gonna thrash around for a little while. And then what you're gonna have is a limp, sobbing child who finally just comes into the chest. And this is really what happens with the ego, is it's exerting itself, and we're either ignoring it or we're shouting at it. And all that does is make it stronger. And what that does is distracts us even more. The havoc that the ego wreaks is less than the havoc wreaked when we decide to wage war on it. The ego is actually a part of us. And I always say, I've got so much faith in God that if He wanted us to be born without an ego, without emotions, He would have created us like that. I mean, God is perfect. However God wanted us to be, He would have created us like that. The ego is there for a purpose. It's crucial for children as they develop. There's very, very crucial stages of child development where they develop the ego. But then what ends up happening is the ego becomes a barrier. And the reason it becomes a barrier is it separates us from the rest of the world. The ego is the one that says, I, me, mine. That's what the ego does. It's all about separation. This is me over here. This is who I am. I'm number one. It's me against you. And all that separation prevents us from having what we really need in life, which is connection. Like the child throwing the temper tantrum. Why does it need attention? What does it get through attention? Connection. It doesn't need attention just if you keep your back turned toward it, okay, fine, buy what you want. No, it needs full-on, locked eyes, eye contact, mother present attention. And this is what the ego is clamoring for. And interestingly, when we actually give it attention, it dissipates. Because that's all it was looking for, is an awareness. I'm also here. You created me. You developed me. I was really important to you when you were young. I'm the one that taught you. This is me. And probably the ego's been wounded. And I don't just mean wounded like today by, somebody treating you rudely. But probably it's been deeply wounded at some time in our life. The ego is what holds expectations. We had expectations perhaps of our parents, perhaps of other family members, perhaps of the universe. And our expectations aren't always fulfilled. And the ego gets hurt. And so really what releasing it requires is first acknowledging it. How has it served you? And then understanding where it is now a barrier. I would love to connect with this person, but I can't because my ego won't let me. This is the person who 5 years ago tried to, take my parking place or take my job or take my spouse, and there's no way now even though that situation is all sorted, I can't connect. The ego is what separates us. And sadly, and even more significantly, the ego is what separates us from God. Because there isn't room for us to be full of our lowercase s self, the ego, and full of the capital S self, the divine. Like we were talking packages, you've got to kind of choose. Who am I going to make room for? Am I going to make room for my ego? Am I going to make room for my desires? Am I going to make room for my arrogance? Am I going to make room for me? What's in it for me? What do I get out of it? Where's me in all this? What do I get? Or am I going to make room for God? And it's a choice we have to make. And again, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just a matter of the package that you want in your life. And the ego package tends to be one that comes with a lot of frustration. Tends to be one that keeps us separate. When what we're yearning for is love, we're yearning for connection. We're biologically programmed to connect. The last piece of this I want to share about the ego is the ego is that which prevents us from opening up to people. And it's similar to connecting, but it's slightly different. I may think I want to connect with you. Just, let's go and have tea. Let's be friends. Fine. But in order for that connection to be really real, in order for that connection to feed me, my soul, not my ego, I need to really be open. I need to be vulnerable. I need to allow you to see me. Because if you don't see me, then we haven't deeply connected. And the ego is the one that says, oh no, sweep that under the carpet. Don't admit to this. Don't tell that person that. Oh my God, what are they going to think of you? What is society going to say? They're going to think you're such a loser. You can't admit to that. You can't share this. You can't let anybody know that. And it's the ego's way of keeping us in jail. The only way to be free is to actually open ourselves up. And only when we open and actually let people see us and actually see others without judgment, without condemnation, are we able to really connect. And that's where it's important to release the ego. To just understand, not my ego is bad, not I hate it, not I've got to wage war, and nothing like that. But just thank you so much for the service you provided when I was young. Thank you so much for the service you provided in high school, getting me to be the top in the class. Thanks so much for what you provided in college. It's what kept me awake all night long. It's what, made me study, because I wanted to be number one. But now, more than being number one, what I want to be is open. I want to be connected. I want to experience God in my life. And you can't do that if we're blocked up. And that's when we start to let the ego go. And it's a process. It's not an overnight thing, because as I said, the ego is very much like an octopus with its hands and its arms in places that we never would have expected its hands and arms to be. And you think you've kind of removed it, and then you experience, oh my God, look, there's another tentacle how is it that my octopus has 32 arms? And you keep experiencing it. And you let go. You just let go. Pujya Swamiji always loves to share something that my dad says. My dad is a divorce attorney, and he's got a little life sutra that Pujya Swamiji loves and shares, which is, you can either be right or you can be married. You can't be both. And that doesn't only apply to marriage between a man and a woman in a spousal actual marriage. It applies to any deep connection in life, whether it's with a spouse, whether it's with a mother, a parent, a child, a friend, a loved one, or with the universe, with God. If I'm so sure that God messed up because this was not supposed to happen, well then I've chosen being right over my marriage to God. I know better than you do. I'm right, you're wrong. And that just separates us. And so we choose over and over, when we're learning to let go of the ego, we just, in every opportunity we have, we choose love over being right. We choose peace in the moment over being right. And then slowly, our habits start to reform. We have a habit now to be right. But slowly, situation after situation, we choose, okay, I choose peace. I choose love. I choose connection. I know I'm right. I know that what you just said isn't true. but our love is true. And I choose that love over being right in this situation. And slowly, slowly, you're going to be so full of the truth, so full of that capital S self, that there just isn't a lot more room for the ego. And it becomes sort of vestigial and eventually dissipates more and more.